The movie begins with a cryptographer named Alex Jacobs entering his house. He gets the shock of a lifetime when he notices a body in his living room. However, before he gets to call 911, he discovers that it's actually his own body, and there's apparently a letter next to it. Intrigued, he opens the letter and finds a flash drive inside an envelope. He plugs it into his computer and a video of him starts playing. The Alex on the screen tells him not to freak out, and he begins to tell him a story. A flashback begins when Alex is woken up by a woman named Rebecca Stillman, who works with the Advanced Research Institute of Science and Technology. She reveals that her organization works closely with the NSA, and then out of nowhere offers him a job. Rebecca presents Alex with a long non-disclosure agreement and tells him that she could not give him any more details until he signs it. At first, he hesitates, but when Rebecca offers him a large sum of money, he accepts the job because he's broke. To prove that she's serious, Rebecca sends him part of the payment, further solidifying Alex's decision, and he ends up signing the NDA. She then provides him with more details about the work that he needs to do, and she tells him that an unregistered satellite that seems to belong to the USA has been discovered. And the catch is, this particular satellite hasn't been launched yet, and her organization believes that it came from the future. The satellite came along with a coded message that they have been unable to crack and needed Alex's help decoding it. The next morning, 2 men from the NSA show up at his house and knock him unconscious before escorting him to a secure facility. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a small room that he will be staying in for the next few months. Rebecca then takes him to the lab and shows him the vacuum that the message came in. Alex jumps headfirst into work, but after 5 unsuccessful weeks, Rebecca suggests that he should take a break and resume working after the weekend. Despite being given some time off, Alex refuses to budge and continues working on solving the code. One day, while he was working, he begins to hallucinate and sees a woman working on the same task and trying to decode the same message that he was working on. Soon, the hallucination ends, and Alex finds that his nose was bleeding. He takes this as a sign to take a break and finally goes to sleep. When he wakes up, he finds that he had scribed code on his bedpost. He immediately rushes to the lab and resumes working on decoding the message again, and after several work hours, Alex manages to decode the message and waits for Rebecca to show up so he can break the news to her. As Rebecca enters the lab, Alex asks her why she hadn't told him that somebody else worked on decoding the same message. When she doesn't respond, he continues talking and tells her that he knows that he was only given half of the message that the woman couldn't decode. He then hands her a stack of papers and informs her that it contains a warning because the device she had shown him earlier is a weapon that can be used for mass destruction and even cause World War III. And the messages that he'd uncovered were blueprints for the weapon. Rebecca refuses to acknowledge anything that he was saying and thanks him for a job well done and informs him that he's gonna be under surveillance for the next few months. Alex is then sedated once again and sent back home. However, he begins to feel sick. But when he notices all this, he assumes that it's probably because of the sedatives. One morning, Alex hears someone at his door, and when he checks, he's surprised to find 2 strange men outside. They claim that they need to ask him a few questions and enter his house. They ask him if he knew the blueprints were going to be used to cause destruction, and at first, Alex refuses to answer the questions and tells them that he's bound by an NDA, which is why he could not say anything. But as his migraine gets worse, he gives in and tells the men that it's not his responsibility to worry about a weapon when his job was only just decoding a message. Once the men leave, Alex's headache starts to get better, and he turns on his computer to find more information about the weapon. However, before he can do anything, the computer turns off and he receives a call from Rebecca, who reminds him that he's being monitored and warns him to never look into the weapon again. Later that night, all of the lights in his house were turned off, and he goes outside to check what was causing the blackouts. This is when he notices one of the men who'd shown up at his house earlier, but this time, the man's body seems to be distorted. All of a sudden, the man starts growing inside and gets several feet tall. Alex rushes back into his house but notices the man outside his window, and both of them reach out, and just as their fingers touch through the glass, the scene changes. One morning, Rebecca shows up outside Alex's house and calls out to him. She finds him in his office working on another theory. He starts rambling and says that the strange men that he had seen are able to control time and space, which is why they can exist in the same space as them, just in a different time. Rebecca then just brushes off this tiny bit of information and claims that she knows about his tumor. Alex gets angry and tells her that it's her fault he's sick because she had placed him in a room with a device that was emitting radiation. Meanwhile, in the present time, Alex takes the body from his living room and buries it in his backyard. He then plays the video again, and Alex in the video says that Rebecca did not want to believe what he was telling them, and he felt helpless until he realized that he was not the only cryptographer. Alex looks up her address and finds that it's actually a woman named Beth Carter, and when he arrives at her house, she refuses to talk to him. However, Alex explains to her that he'd also developed a brain tumor and only has 6 months left. Hearing this, Beth opens the door for him and the two of them begin to talk. She tells him that she only has 2 months left, and she also reveals that after her job ended, she started talking to a mysterious man who had hacked into her computer. This man called himself the Cipher Man, and he sends Beth tasks to decode daily. All of a sudden, Beth starts to feel sick, and Alex takes Beth to her room before going through the tasks that she'd solved for the Cipher Man. Sometime later, he notices a message from this person on Beth's computer. He immediately replies back to the message, but Cipher Man figures out that he is not Beth and stops messaging. The next morning, Beth finds out that Alex had gone through her stuff, and she tells him to go home and leave her alone. When Alex returns, he sees Rebecca on his doorstep. And this time, again, she tells him to stay away from Beth and to stop looking into things, but he brushes off her warnings and goes inside his house. He discovers that the organization had taken away all his research, and that night he receives a message from Cipher Man who informs her that Beth is on her way to his house. Just then the doorbell rings and Alex finds Beth waiting outside. She tells him that he was right about his theory that Cipher Man was trying to help them out. As days go by, the two of them work with Cipher Man to make a virus that they can use to destroy the machine. One day, Rebecca shows up at Alex's house and reveals that she'd been working with Cipher Man to destroy the machine, but now the ARIST organization has caught up to her. She then goes on to add that Cipher Man is Miles Driscoll, one of the founders of the organization. And just as agents from the NSA arrive at their doorstep, she instructs them to find him. Rebecca stays back while Beth and Alex escape, and this results in her getting killed. Meanwhile, the two of them arrive at Miles' house. He tells them that the purpose of this was so that interdimensional beings could tether themselves to this dimension, and the new machine will allow these beings not to only interact in their dimension, but also be able to alter some things. And for now, they're only limited to being able to see events happen. Miles goes on to tell them that he had become friends with one of the interdimensional beings that stayed with him for over 30 years. However, Alex and Beth were both unable to see it, which only proves that they're running out of time to stop the activation of the machine. The only solution that the three of them come up with is that they need to physically destroy the machine itself. Sometime later, Beth and Alex go to the organization's building where they find that time has already started looping due to the activation of the machine. Beth finds that she's also gotten stuck in the loop and activates a bomb, but she discovers that she's unable to leave either. At this point, Alex takes matters into his own hands and he takes the device and runs through space. Before he can make it far, an interdimensional being catches up to him and touches him, causing both of them to disintegrate. Alex wakes up to find himself strapped to a chair, and across from him, the interdimensional being stares at him. The alien being starts talking and tells Alex that they've been very curious to see what it's like living in a dimension where time is a linear concept. It says that for humans, the one thing that they fear most is losing time and death, and he then asks Alex what would he do with the knowledge that he has now if he could go back in time. Before he can respond, he blacks out, and the next time he wakes up, Alex finds himself back in his house, where he then goes on to record the video of his past self. and the movie ends with Alex visiting Beth so he can then warn her to stay away from the device.